There are some photographs that become famous because they are beautiful. And then there are photographs that become famous because they force you to confront something you don't want to see. This is the story behind one of the most haunting photographs ever taken. A starving little girl. A vulture waiting nearby. And a photographer who stood there with his camera. The photograph was taken in 1993 during a devastating famine in Sudan. The photographer was Kevin Carter, a South African photojournalist. He had traveled to Sudan to document the suffering caused by hunger and war. And then one day, he saw something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. A small child was struggling to reach a United Nations feeding center. She was exhausted, her body weakened by starvation. She stopped to rest on the ground. And just behind her was a vulture. The bird stood patiently, watching. Carter raised his camera and captured the moment. The photograph was eventually published by the New York Times. It became internationally famous. People were horrified. But the photograph also created an uncomfortable question. What happened to the little girl? For years, many people believed Carter had simply photographed her and walked away. The criticism became intense. People wanted to know why he hadn't carried her to safety. But the reality was more complicated. Carter later explained that he had been instructed not to touch famine victims because of the risk of disease. And reports indicated that the child eventually reached the feeding center. But the photograph had already become something much bigger than a single moment. It became a symbol of famine, poverty, and humanity's struggle to look away from suffering. And then came the tragedy that made the story even darker. 4 years after taking the photograph, Kevin Carter died by suicide. He was only 33 years old. His death led many people to connect his struggles with the horrors he had witnessed as a photojournalist. But the photograph itself remains controversial because sometimes a picture doesn't show us what happened. It makes us ask what we would have done. A little girl struggling to survive. A vulture waiting nearby. And a photographer who pressed the shutter. One photograph that made the entire world stop and look.